Hi, Frank.
Oh, it's Rich.
Oh, Trish came on too. Hi. All right. There's a lot to unpack in this book, movie, half of a book. Before we do though, I want to open for questions because there are some elements that happen in the movie that you might have a need for clarification for if you haven't read the books or didn't read them for a long time. So, did anything not make sense to someone?
Yes.
The whole thing.
When Voldemort goes over
Dumbledore's grave.
Dumbledore's grave and pulls out the wand, I thought that was given to Harry in part of the endowment that Voldemort gave to everybody.
No, they said Gryffindor's sword.
The sword.
Gryffindor's
I know,
sword,
but
and
they
that's
pulled
what-
it out and Harry was looking at it and I just.
Yeah, at the end of the sixth movie, you're right. He does touch it, but he leaves it on the desk. McGonagall
That's
comes and
right.
says to him, "You meant a great deal to him." Yeah.
Right.
So no, Harry didn't take the wand
I
that
must have blinked out.
day. Harry did not take that wand. So Voldemort robbed the grave and took it.
Sure.
Yep. That's it.
No, I got a question.
Okay.
Baltimore having to protect Snake all the time. Is it just a snake, someone or something?
Say that again.
The snake.
Why is he protecting it?
Yeah.
Did you watch the seventh one yet? Did you watch the eighth movie yet? Ever?
Next one.
You'll figure
Hey,
it
then we're not gonna tell you.
Don't ask.
No, I want to applaud a lot of people because sometimes we tap dance around things that we have to build context for later, but nobody's spoiled anything.
It's so difficult
I
though. 'cause there's
know,
so many
and you earned
points.
so many gold stars.
504 today?
Yeah, 504 today.
504 stars today. Yeah.
Oh, you do know that.
But why, during the movie, he says, I have to protect you and stuff, and I'm like, well, it's just a snake, isn't it, or is there?
What's Harry been hunting? What's Harry been hunting the entire seventh movie? What's he hunting? Why are they on their mission?
He's coming after Harry.
Yeah.
Voldemort
Wait
went
till
Harry.
it'll click.
Okay.
It'll click. When you watch it again and we have this conversation today and then you watch that next week, it'll click. And I don't want to ruin it. By I mean the collective we. We're gonna try our best to not ruin that. Let it be a shock for them. Like when you watch the Home Alone for the first time. You watch all those traps go off. So that's it for now.
No more questions.
Is anyone confused at what that deer looking Patronus was out in the woods?
Something with his mother,
Maybe.
because that's when he sees it. Like, yeah. That it has something to do with his mother, I think.
Okay.
We just watched it.
So it's when he finds the sword.
Okay.
Oh, again.
Remember what shot?
When he goes down,
Oh, the deer?
yeah.
Yeah.
Any guesses,
You know
like,
where that Patronus is?
What did he see the deer before?
Oh, that was a long time.
well,
ago.
he saw his father's Patronus, but really it's his Patronus.
Right,
Mhm.
but I thought that was,
Black.
no, Weasley's, because he came
Mhm.
and he said.
Oh,
that
Ron.
Ron Weasley, that the light
Mhm.
kept talking to him and brought him, and that's how he found them.
Right,
So I thought, well, that was the Patronus.
yeah.
But maybe not.
Isn't it also Snape's?
It is Snape's, yes. So the reason I want that to be let out in the open right now is because there's something missing that's in the books that I just want to explain a little bit. The kids, when they're at Grimmauld Place, that's Harry's home. He has inherited that from his godfather. So they show up there and they figure out that they need to get this Horcrux locket that Umbridge is wearing. And it makes it seem like the next day they go and they just get it. There's many days and months that pass while they're trying to figure all of this out. There's at least a month of time where they're planning and trying to figure out how to get into the ministry. So it's not like they just went on a whim. But during that time, some things happen with Creature's relationship and Harry's, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But a piece that is obviously not in the movies that makes it a little bit confusing is that Hermione all of a sudden realizes when they hear that Snape is going to be the headmaster of Hogwarts, Hermione, it dawns on her, there's a portrait in this house that is also in the headmaster's office. Phineas Nigellus Black was a headmaster of Hogwarts. Black, last name Black, was someone that Sirius was an heir of. And so because of that, Hermione goes and takes the portrait off the wall, puts a little jinx on it so that the guy can't see anything. He's wearing a blindfold. And he goes back and forth between the headmaster's office to spy on Snape and to talk to the kids. So there's some things that we just don't gather as well. And part of Phineas being there is why they end up with the sword. So it just kind of, it gives a little bit more understanding there. And it also kind of helps you to feel that the kids are a little more in control than just doing things on a whim. I do feel like the movie might make it feel like they're just flying by the seat of their pants without much forethought.
Planning, like,
Yeah.
they're very reckless still, but like there is, like, Hermione brings some logic to the team.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, but them, and I guess they do bring some of that when they say, well, let's go see Mr. Lovegood. They do some planning. But there's some elements that are just missing that makes it seem like the kids are a little bit wayward, which they are, but they do have a little more with itness than the movie presents. Yeah. So when we were doing the second book movie, we talked about the Malfoys and we talked about their arrogance with being purebloods. And so let's take some time and let's review what we know about the Malfoy family and what we've gained in insight about them. And then in conjunction with that, we talked that same week, I alluded to something that was in this movie. And I said that there was a statue. Harry saw it in the 5th movie. And then they replaced that statue now in the 7th movie. And in the initial 5th movie, the statue had been where the goblins and the centaurs and all of the creatures that are not human-like, wizards and witches, were below the witches and wizards. And this was like a water fountain, and it was a decoration in the Ministry of Magic. Harry saw that when he went for his trial. Then in the 7th one, we see that when they show up with their polyjuice potion and they're standing in the ministry, they kind of stop short and they go, what is that? Muggles in their rightful place. So they say that in the movie, but the statue itself, or water fountain, is like Muggles are like beneath the wizards and they're like stepping on them.
They're being crushed.
And they're being crushed, yeah. So all that in relation to the Malfoys and the good versus evil, or I just want to open up for those elements of conversation now.
I feel like last week we saw a lot of development in the Malfoy story, because before the 6th book, Malfoy is still like a schoolyard like rival type of character. Like he's not like evil, but he's also not like, he's obviously not like a good person, but he's like a bratty child. Like he's not bad. But then in the 6th book is when he really takes his turn in the story, and he's actively working for the dark side, like, and is an actual marked Death Eater now.
He made an obvious choice there.
But I don't think he was happy about having to make that choice.
No.
I got the look on his face that, you know, I really want to just live. I don't want to have to do this stuff.
He's being pushed by his folks.
Well, I think, and I don't think the movie touches on it, but I think the book says more about Voldemort doesn't plan for him to succeed in the 6th book. He doesn't plan for it. He's making Draco do this as a punishment to his father for failing in the last book at the Ministry of Magic. He's punishing his father because when Draco fails, that's more than enough reason for Voldemort to just kill him or to punish him in some cruel way, or that's why he's doing it. He doesn't expect Draco to actually be able to kill Dumbledore.
'Cause it's not like he can actually punish Lucius because Lucius is in jail. So instead he goes after the thing that Lucius probably values most, which is the continuation of the Malfoy line. Like taking away Draco is to just like basically kill off the Malfoys in any like future hopes. And also, I mean, like Narcissa in the sixth book, you can definitely tell that she really values and cares about her son and her family. Like especially with that promise that she made to Snape. So
Desperation.
Yeah, she was desperate.
the mothers in the series are really like, they really care so much about their children. Like you can see it in all the mothers, like Narcissa, Lily, Molly Weasley, even Petunia Dursley in her own backwards way. She like ruins Dudley, but she does it because she cares about him.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
the Malfoy family is like special in the way that they are like so influential in wizarding society, like, and how high up that Lucius is in Voldemort's ranks. Draco has this like sort of pressure on him to perform at a high level, but he's still this spoiled little rich kid that he was just a book ago, but now he's been faced with an impossible task, and I feel like that definitely left him with some very much exceeding trauma after the sixth book. And also like imagine how like scary it must have been for him to be around all those Death Eaters and like all these like mass murderers and torturers
Yeah.
as just a kid.
Yeah, and even though he didn't have that professor, at the very beginning when they're at the big table, that's actually at the Malfoy's house. So they're hosting all of this, but they're not in charge anymore. And they're not at the head of the table, right? They're right in the center of the table. But here he is watching a professor he's seen for 6 years, and maybe he wasn't in that Muggle Studies class, but I'm sure he saw her at, dinner and in the hallways and
The teacher.
yeah.
And I think to some extent, like we talked about how Draco is making an impossible choice. I feel like it almost comes down to the thing of it's not really a choice for him, unless I guess it's the choice between him attempting to do this task or him just, his sacrificing his life to, but let's be honest, he's always been a person who puts his own self-worth above everything else, I guess I would say. And so it's really a thing of he's not being given a choice. Voldemort is saying, you do this task or you're not coming out of it alive, and I think that's the whole point that we see in the end of the sixth book is that Dumbledore knows this. He knows that Draco is still just a scared kid that's being basically blackmailed into doing this. Dumbledore doesn't put up a fight. He knows that if he could easily be, even in his weakened state, I think he easily could have beat Draco away.
Well, and also I said this last week, but Draco in the sixth one seems very disposable.
Yeah.
Like there's that whole idea. And I think my favorite's probably not the right word, but the most consequential scene in 7 part 1 here is with Draco identifying Harry in that. Like I hate that scene. But that whole thing is just like it sends shivers down my spine with like Hermione screaming and all that. Like it's hard to watch. But at least Dobby's in that scene, giving us comicness and all that stuff. But then they take Dobby away from us. That's okay. But Draco, like you can tell he's making the decision about what to do. And it's interesting seeing all the Malfoys in that instance, like they're tired, they're tired of being used as pawns. They don't know how to get out of it. And there's that whole family dynamic. I don't remember the book. It's been a while since we listened to the book, but it's in the movie. They're just exasperated, and it's amazing that Draco finally just goes. He just doesn't do anything.
Well, just watching how meek Lucius is when Voldemort snaps his wand and then ever so subtly reaches out like, oh, you're gonna trade me? Oh, no, never mind, you're not. And it's a little more obvious in the book because there's actual narration, but Voldemort's like, oh, you fool, you thought I was gonna give you my wand? Absolutely not. You're
Well,
not
it's
worthy.
funny because I always looked at his hair.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know,
In this movie, they look haggard. the whole
Yes,
time.
yes. Well, he has been in Azkaban. He's been in Azkaban and now he's been released into this life he's not really sure he wants.
I feel like the Malfoys weren't expecting this when they decided to like allow, I mean, not allow isn't the right word, when Voldemort decided to allow himself into their home. I don't think they were ready for war. I think they thought they would live their little cushy ministry life still, and they're in an actual dirty, bloody war.
Yeah. And then her sister, Bellatrix, or Narcissa's sister, she is so opposite. She is all in and she is ready to fight. And so that in contrast just makes us see how much the Malfoys are apprehensive in
no,
all
the
this.
lady with the black hair that wanted to kill him. Oh, that was Malfoy's sister?
Yeah.
Not sister-in-law.
Auntie.
So the wife, Narcissa, the one with the black and white hair, is the sister of the one with the curly black hair.
The family relationships with the Black family are so interesting.
Correct, they're also like cousins of Sirius Black.
Like,
Yeah,
And Tonks's mother was another sister,
yeah,
right?
because there's
Yeah.
three sisters.
Bellatrix's niece.
Like, there's Narcissa and Bellatrix and Andromeda, and they're all just so like polar opposites of each other. 'Cause Narcissa's like the like prim and proper like trophy wife of Lucius. Bellatrix is like the insane woman who went out and tortured Neville's parents. And then Andromeda is like the black sheep of the Black family. Like she went out and married a Muggle-born. So there's so many dynamics and aspects to their family. It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
I never felt that Malfoy was in it for anything more than power.
Mhm.
And that, he actually didn't stop to think, like you said, that this is gonna be a war.
Mhm.
He was just doing his thing to
Yeah.
get as high as he could, and now all of a sudden he's gotta pay the piper, and
But,
Yeah.
and I think like the purity of the thing, like that's, I haven't talked about it.
Kristen.
I haven't talked about it in a while, but the whole idea of be careful that you get what you want, like that's like the whole idea of like purity of the line and all those things. That's definitely something that is be careful that you get what you want in that.
Mhm.
And yeah, because that's you're kind of on the bad side of stuff then. Yeah.
I don't think the purebloods stop to consider the long-term consequences of joining
Mhm.
Voldemort either. Because at this point, Voldemort is like verifiably insane. Like maybe he wasn't insane at the beginning, whatever. Like I can see, like, okay, whatever. But now he is crazy. And I don't know what their thinking is. Like, how do they know when Voldemort will stop? Like they think that, oh, he's gonna like help the purebloods and like fix the wizarding world by like exterminating the muggles or whatever. So he exterminates the muggles and then he's like, oh, well, I'll exterminate the muggle-borns too. And then, well, the half-bloods aren't purebloods, so they're gone too.
Oh, wait, maybe I'll kill myself.
Yeah.
And what if he gets to the purebloods and decides that they're not good enough either? Like he's so insane that, and I think that then now they're finally starting to realize that now that they're in the war.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know who's seen the movie Mean Girls, but it's about like a clique of evil girls in a high school. And one of them finally says, it's better to be in the plastics or the clique and hating life than not to be in it all. And I think that's part of the same.
Well, and I
mentality
also
here.
think, because a movie about the same time as this one, The Dark Knight Rises, talks about all the same stuff with Bane. And you could tell all the politicians in it are using Bane, this guy who's just a meat cake and all that stuff. Like they're using him to gain power. And the guy goes, no, like Bane starts doing something he doesn't like. And the politician goes, no, I'm in charge here. And like Bane puts his hand on the guy's shoulder and goes, does it feel like you're in charge? And I think like that's one of the classic lines in cinema now. But I think that's how the Malfoys are with Voldemort.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, well, we can keep him, get what we want out of this.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't.
You're gonna say
My first thought was, again, Germany, World War II. You know, Hitler with the, oh, this guy's gonna make everything good. And when they finally realized that they had a madman, it was too late.
He did do the Autobahn.
So as a transition here, we remember that the Malfoys were extremely wicked to Dobby, right? And then the Crouch family, you know, they were not so good to their house elf Winky. We talked about a little bit from book 4. And then we even saw that Sirius, who Harry admired in many ways, was not very kind to Creature, the house elf in Grimmauld Place. And there's a part in the book where Dumbledore tells Harry that Creature now belongs to him because he's inherited him. And Harry is inclined to set him free because he believes that house elves should be free. But Dumbledore tells him, are you sure you want this elf that has all the secrets of the order to be set free? So he actually sends Creature to work at Hogwarts during the school year. Well, Creature ends up back at Grimmauld Place when, as we saw in the movie, Creature is hanging out with Harry and Hermione and Ron. And I have a little turning point of conversation that I want to read from the book to build a little more context about Harry's recognition of house elves as more than he's done in the past. Because although he liked Dobby, he wasn't necessarily like feeling like he was an equal with Dobby or anything. He was always seeing him as like a little kid kind of thing. But he started to recognize Creature in a different way. Harry took Dumbledore's words to heart and began to treat Creature as a being with feelings as acute as a human's. That's a quote from the book. While still acknowledging Creature's position as his slave, Harry spoke to him with kindness and respect. Creature, said Harry, when you feel up to it, please sit down. It was several minutes before Creature hiccuped himself into silence. Then he pushed himself into a sitting position, rubbing his knuckles and eyes like a small child. Creature is panicked at this time because Regulus, his master, has gone to get that locket, and we find out that Creature actually went with him. Creature, I'm going to ask you something, said Harry. He glanced at Hermione for assistance. He wanted to give the order kindly, but in the same time, he could not pretend that it was not an order. However, the change in his tone seemed to have gained her approval, and she smiled encouragingly. Creature, I want you, please, to go and find Mundungus Fletcher. We need to find out where Master Regulus's locket is. It's very important. We want to finish the work that Master Regulus started, and we want to ensure that he didn't die in vain. Find Mundungus Fletcher, he croaked. Yes, and bring him here to Grimmauld Place. Do you think you can do that for us? So this recognition of I have power over someone, and yet I'm going to try in all ways possible to acknowledge that I can still be kind, I can still be polite. I thought that that was a good representation of Harry's growth in this area. And in this sense of there's so many battles over power in these books. And we were just talking about with the Malfoy family, Harry really has come to terms with, you know, ruling with
Well,
kindness.
he asked rather than demanded, which is what apparently the owners of elves do. They just. do
Right.
it.
Right. And so in that same time frame, the kitchen was almost unrecognizable. So Harry's changed his attitude with Creature, and Creature is now in kind, you know, acting differently. Every surface now shone. Copper pots and pans had been burnished to a rosy glow, and the wooden tabletop gleamed. The goblets and the plates already laid for dinner glinted in the light from a merrily blazing fire on which a cauldron was simmering. Nothing in the room, however, was more dramatically different than the house elf, who now came hurrying towards Harry, dressed in a snowy white towel, his ear hair as clean and fluffy as cotton wool, and Regulus's locket bouncing on his thin chest proudly. So not only is he the servant of Harry at this point, now he is actually an ally with him. And I find that to be interesting. So we can talk about Dobby, we can talk about Creature, but what do we have to talk about as far as this house elf relationship with wizards?
I think that house elves are too powerful to be discounted. Like a lot of wizards, especially like the purebloods, like count them out and like see them as like lesser beings. But like as we saw in the second book, when Dobby like blasted Lucius back, like house elves have their own magic. Like they're very powerful. And I think that having one as his ally is very good for Harry.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was able to apparate out of that dungeon when typically magic doesn't allow wizards to apparate in and out of others' homes. And so Harry couldn't have gotten out of that dungeon without a house elf.
I think house elves having their own type of magic is like subversion that is useful against purebloods who will not think of that. They remind me of Hermione, and they're very like one set thinking.
Yeah,
Is it also possible that the Darby, when you talk about that one scene where he attacks Malfoy, maybe Dobby's just now coming into the realization that he's a free elf and he does have power, where the others, they're being kept as slaves so that they're not thinking that we can get out of this.
yeah.
You know, we have the power to change this.
Yeah. In the seventh book, but towards the end, in fact, Creature has this cute little line. He goes, "Fight, fight for my master, defender of house elves. Fight the Dark Lord in the name of brave Regulus, fight." So he's acknowledging he has two masters, Regulus that he's living in the memory of, and then also Harry, the defender of house elves. And he recognizes too that Harry has made a change in his direction with Creature.
All right, so if you're able to acknowledge that point, I can acknowledge that point. So I feel like that is the real, where we really see the fruition of Harry's turning point as far as towards house elves and other species, you know, like I think we see the start of him growing, you know, when he's growing that relationship with Creature, but we don't really see the payoff of, okay, so what could that do us until, you know, the house elves, they come to their aid at the final battle. You know, they're not just running and hiding, you know, they're not weak.
Yeah.
They're not just liabilities, you know, like Ron saying we need to go to the kitchen, the house elves are down, and Hermione's like, to get them to run. He's like, or you know, and I feel like that is really where it comes to fruition.
That's even more growth too, because we saw that Ron, having grown up as a pureblood, even though he's not in a family that has evil motives for power, like maybe the Malfoys do, he still has prejudices against the house elves. And yeah, he does. He goes and says, "Hermione, we need to go make sure the house elves are okay, that they even know that this battle's going on." And that's a moment where she's just like, in the, you know, it's a good thing that they have that opportunity to grow.
I feel like the pureblood culture as a whole just like counts out other species that aren't wizards.
Yeah.
Like, because okay, so the Malfoys and the Crouches, it's not surprising that they would treat their house elves badly, because like from what we've seen of their families and like their lifestyles, like it's not surprising. But Sirius Black treating a house elf poorly when he's supposed to be on like the good side, like he's like fighting with the Order of the Phoenix, like why is he being so like hateful? And then with Ron, he counts him out too. I think that's a subject of like the culture that they were brought up in.
Yeah.
Especially like if we can look at the Ministry statue again, like with the wizards being raised above everything, like that's such a like, it's in the middle of their atrium, like it's a key belief that's held widely throughout their community.
Yeah, and they're the only ones with a school, you know,
Yeah.
for training.
I think that's a good point, and calls back to this is not a story of black and white, you know, Sirius, like you said, Sirius is not perfect. Harry's not perfect, you know, we make mistakes, and not everything's black and white. Malfoy, you know, he does a few good things over the series. He's not a complete antagonist, you know, it's not just black and white.
So let's talk about the growth of the trio in other ways. They're wandering in the wilderness, they're alone, they're hearing bits and pieces of news in different capacities, but they're really not quite sure what's going on because Dumbledore didn't tell Harry what Harry thinks is enough information, basically, right? And so what do we notice about their relationship and their progress during this movie?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I feel like it gets both strained and strengthened in different spots. I think they had to go through that time of like anger at each other and like their like separation to come back to a stronger relationship with each other, because without that period of hardship, I think it would have been hard to continue on. I think Ron needed to have his moment, and I think he needed to like take a step back to really realize that he was meant to be with them and to help them.
I think that, I think the movie does Ron as a service as far as that goes, because if you read the books, the movie really portrays Ron as a bad person, or, you know, like a whiny kind of, you know, like spoiled, however you want to say. The movie really portrays him poorly. Whereas the books, you know, he's not doing great. He's not perfect, but he's not like the one moment probably that definitely passed the line where he talked about Harry not having parents, right? In the books, yeah, that's a like, why would Ron ever say it? The books, that doesn't happen. It's actually Harry that talks about his parents. Ron never brings that up. Ron from the books would never go that far, even when he's wearing the amulet. And I feel like the kind of like the duality of personalities here, I guess, conflict.
Because Ron in the movies is very much like, he's not a good friend to Harry at all.
Yeah.
Like he's not, it's in the movies, it's Harry and Hermione doing best friend things, like saving the day, and then Ron's there as like comedic relief. In the books, Ron is Harry's best friend. Like it's Hermione that gets left out, if anyone. Like Ron and Harry are like teenage boys doing teenage boy things, and then Hermione like is like another presence in the trio. Like she's very important to them, but Ron will always be Harry's best friend, and he's such a good friend to Harry. Like some people like wonder about Ron ending up in Hufflepuff because of how like starkly loyal he is, especially like if we look at Percy compared. Percy Weasley, in the letter that he wrote to Ron, telling Ron that he should stay away from Harry and like discouraging their friendship, I feel like, and Ron like said no and like turned his back on his own brother and fought for Harry. Like so many moments where Ron is just like completely miswritten.
Yeah.
Especially like even more so, they kind of like show Ron to be like kind of like a liability a lot of time. Like they showed him that the movies make him out to like he's not very good at magic, or he's, you know, yeah, he's weak, but he's shown to be very talented in the books. Actually, you know, obviously when you stand next to the chosen one, it's hard to step out of that shadow, but the books still do a really good job of showing us that he's talented in a lot of different forms of magic. And like you said, he's a very loyal friend, and like the movies don't even show when he's made a prefect. You know, they don't show that, and that's one of his higher points, is that he was made a prefect when Harry was not.
Right. And also, they kind of allude to it in the movie when they're in the tent after, and when they're saying, well, how much longer do you think she's gonna be mad at me? Well, just keep talking about that little ball of light touching your heart, and I think she'll come around. I love that line. It's cute.
Yeah.
But in that moment, Ron says, oh, I got this wand off of a snatcher. Do you want it? Well, Ron fought off snatchers and got away. Like clearly he has talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ron, like, I'm not familiar with the books really at all. And so like, I really looked at the movie. I was sitting there racking my brain because I meant to remember something about Ron to talk about today. But that you see the Weasleys being the linchpin. I think it could have been when he has to break the locket with the sword. But again, it goes back to the Weasleys. That it's the Weasleys, especially in the movies, I think it's in the book too, are this like, they look weak. But that's where the strength keeps lying, is with stuff that looks weak, whereas Voldemort, everything about him is strength and greatness and all that stuff, and there's nothing there, you know?
Yeah. So as a segue to talking about the gifts that Dumbledore left them, and then us talking through Dumbledore's poor attempt at communicating with these teenagers, I want to transition with this line that doesn't come up in the movie, and again, it's a gut-wrenching sort of thing, but I really see a parallel with Jesus and Peter when it comes to Dumbledore and with Ron, because Jesus says, "You're going to deny me," like, and Peter says, "Lord, I'm ready to go to prison for you or unto death. And I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And Jesus gives Peter that opportunity to come back. And Jesus knows what's happening that next night, that the world is in his hands. He knows the end of the story. And yet still Peter denies him, right? And so in that sense, Dumbledore knew what he was doing when he gave me the Deluminator, didn't he? Ron's ear turned bright red and he became engrossed in a tuft of grass at his feet, which he prodded with his toes. He must have known I'd run out on you. Because remember, the Deluminator brought him back. No, Harry corrected him. He must have known you'd always want to come back. And just,
Yeah,
I wish that's in the movie.
well, he made the one comment, the minute I was gone, I knew I had to come back, or I was sorry I left.
That is in the movie, isn't it? That's the sense.
Yeah, that is in the movie.
Yeah,
Harry says he must have known.
I
you
don't think
always
it's
wanted to
worded
come
just
back.
like that, but the sense
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
is definitely
Yeah.
there. Like that whole idea of like, no, like he knew
Right.
I was gonna run out, but about to coming back and all that.
Yeah,
I don't think it's said. That's-
right. So where do we see the Deluminator previously?
In the first.
Yeah, when they did the streetlights.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a device of Dumbledore's own making. And at first glance to the Minister of Magic, who's inspecting these items before he gives them back to the kids, all it seems is it turns lights on and off, but there's a deeper magic related to love that's connected with this. And Hermione calling out Ron's name while Harry's basically in a coma from the trauma of the snake situation at Godric's Hollow. And Hermione's just, pining for Ron. That's the sound that draws him back. And I think that's really special. But what do we think of the other gifts that Dumbledore left the kids? And kids, I mean, technically they're of age at 17, but
Yeah.
Barely.
I know.
I think the biggest one is obviously the snitch, is the snitch with, I guess I can't really go into what secret it holds, but I
It
definitely.
opens at the close.
Yes, yeah. I think Dumbledore's genius really shines through there, and how perfectly he plans it. We could speak more on, I guess, next week when we figure out what it opens and what happens. But it definitely lets you know that Dumbledore had a lot planning, that he just did not give all the pieces to Harry because he had other things going on, or he didn't think Harry needed to have every single piece, because it's a thing of like, one time he tells Harry that he's a good leader because leadership is thrust upon him. He does not seek it. I think it's kind of the same thing here. If he gave Harry too much information, Harry might make the wrong decision. It might not be a natural decision for Harry to do the right thing.
Well, Harry was a seeker. He looked for information from the very first movie, trying to figure out what's under the trap door and all the way back then.
I think this is another example of Dumbledore, the war general, being brought back, because like will never reveal and like too much information to his pawns.
Right.
Other than if they're on the right path to do what Dumbledore wants them to do, it's fine. They don't need the information. They'll be fine. And I don't think Dumbledore expected to die at this point yet. I think that the ring cursing his finger like that was unexpected, and he made plans to accommodate to that. At the one point, he obviously did have the plan to die, but that wasn't probably in his like 5th year plans, or like when Harry was a 4th year. Like, I don't think he was ready for that, and the lack of information that Harry has at this point shows that. I think that Dumbledore knew like beforehand that he was going to die so soon. I think that Harry would be much more informed. But at this point, with Dumbledore's death so recent still, I think that Harry is still looking for the guidance that he's missing. Especially, and like, I can understand why Dumbledore didn't tell him from the perspective of having to lead a side of a war. Like, Harry's very vulnerable. He's a 17-year-old kid who's been shown that like Voldemort can get in his head. Like, secrets can just be like extracted.
Just the year before, yeah.
So there's just so much danger involved in telling Harry any like state secrets like that.
I do agree that is the heart of the matter. And I know that it doesn't come across in a movie just because you don't really get someone's inner thoughts. And I think that's why they rush to make Ron a little more negative than he is, just because it's easier to present on camera, a little more polarizing. But for Harry, there's so many elements of this book where he is doubting his relationship with Dumbledore. You hear at Elphias Doge at that wedding, the old man who wrote the Daily Prophet article that knew Dumbledore from a kid age. He says, well, did you even know the boy at all? And the aunt said that too. And so that was supposed to be helping us understand that Harry was doubting his relationship with Dumbledore. Well, did Dumbledore even really trust me? Well, did Dumbledore even really want me to do this? Did he this? Did he that? And I think it presents Harry with a lot of doubt. And not only that, but Harry's failing at even using this snitch. And I think that boils up in him too. And at least finally they do get the sword and use it accurately.
When they were camping out, how long of a time was that? Because I didn't get a relationship, but it seemed like it was seasons and seasons.
So it doesn't give exact dates, but in the book, it does say that it's the Easter holidays when they show up at the Lovegoods house. And so we get that at the very end of the movie when they're at the house where they are with Luna's dad. So they also were there at Christmas. They went to Godric's Hollow,
Right.
and
The wedding
on
is done in
September
summer, right?
1st was around the time that they, like maybe a few days after September 1st is when they went to the Ministry of Magic. So it was most of a school year that they're out in the wilderness alone.
Harry's birthday is celebrated like on the same
July
day
Right.
as the wedding, right?
Yeah.
And they
Right.
leave right after the wedding, so.
Yeah.
But
So they have about a month and a half in the Grimmauld place while they're planning. Then they can't go back there
Right.
because they were the secret keepers with the magic. They could see it part, remember? But because that Yaxley man ended up on that stoop with them, all of a sudden the magic of the secret was broken. And so that's why they couldn't go back there. So that was a little complicated. And then we have Hermione's book. So little comic relief in the book is where it's presented in the movie too a little bit, where Ron's like, don't you guys know these tales? You know, Babbity Rabbity. And then Hermione goes, Ron, we were brought up by muggles. Like we had Cinderella and Snow White. He's like, who?
Snow White's actually pretty good. I've read them all. Like
Yeah.
they sold them like in the book, so they're actually pretty entertaining for children's stories. Pretty dark too.
I think the way that Dumbledore, presents the gifts is really interesting as well. How he has these 3 gifts, one for each of them. And, one just looks like this, it's the first snitch he caught. The other one's just a Duometer, looks on, and the other one's just a book. He hides the details he wants them to give in plain sight so that the ministry cannot get to them, or whoever might be able to get their hands on them. He hides the details there in plain sight. except for the last gift, which is the sword, which he must know there's no way they are going to hand the sword to Harry and them. But he does it, I think, simply for the fact that they know this is something we need. You know, this, he meant for us to have this. So even if he could not give it to them, they know, hey, this is going to be useful. This is going to be important on your journey.
The sword presents itself to any worthy Gryffindor. And so that is kind of where, I guess, when you're watching this movie, you kind of think, okay, well, that's why the sword showed up in the water, because they needed it. You know, like you're kind of almost thinking that there was no other magic or no other magician involved. It was just, oh, this is what the Gryffindor sword does. But the sword did hold a secret that the Ministry didn't know. It held the secret of the basilisk venom. And so the sword just looked like a weapon, but the sword wasn't a weapon against flesh and blood. The weapon was against spirit. Yeah. And I think that is at the heart of Dumbledore's understanding that is deeper than any of the kids or any of the characters that are part of the order, any of them understand. So we get a little taste of Dumbledore's backstory, but there's a little bit more to it, and we'll kind of end talking about Dumbledore and Harry. And then like a minute or so on poor little Dobby, we'll end with a point about Dobby. But there are actually 2 scriptures that are on the graves in Godric's Hollow. So when Harry and Hermione go there, Harry goes to try and find his parents' grave immediately, but they find that Peveril grave, and they get the clue about this Peveril family having to do with this symbol that the Lovegoods have, which now we know is a Deathly Hallows symbol. But we also find Ariana Dumbledore, which is Professor Dumbledore's little sister, who died long, long time ago, and his mother's grave. And on their graves, because Dumbledore would have been the head of household at this point, his father was dead, you know, chose the engravings on the grave. And what we actually have is from Matthew 6:21, which is where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, which coincidentally was in today's gospel reading. Good job, Chris. It's not planned. Divinely inspired. So Dumbledore learned the cost of seeking earthly treasures above treasures of people and relationships. And really, really knew this, because what we don't get in the movie is that Rita Skeeter book that they had in Godric's Hollow. He and Harry and Hermione actually are reading that book, and we get excerpts of that book during the book. And we find out that Dumbledore and this other wizard Grindelwald were like going to be on this quest for power, this quest for things that Harry found to be offensive, honestly, because Harry's had this transition with Creature and everything.
Three muggles?
That was Dumbledore's father.
Oh, that was his father.
Yes. So his father killed 3 muggles, then they moved to Godric's Hollow, and then a terrible accident happened and his sister died. And so then this is the context of the quote that Dumbledore chooses. It says, lay not up your treasures on earth where moth and rust corrupt, or where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust will corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I think of the call back to the Mirror of Erised here, because Harry proved himself to Dumbledore at the end of the first movie, because Dumbledore set up a trap with that stone and said, I'm only going to allow someone to take the stone who wants it, but not to use it. And so Harry has lived by this principle without knowing it, just out of who he is as a person, and that Dumbledore has fostered that in him over these years. So whether or not Harry truly understands what Dumbledore wants from him, or whether or not Dumbledore truly is a good person, which Brad mentions with Sirius too, we're not all Death Eaters or perfect. There's light and dark in each of us. That's the case with Dumbledore here. He's recognizing that Harry and he both know that there's more to life than just the physical things. Whereas we've got Voldemort, who's like, I want these tangible Horcruxes that are going to hold my soul, and these physical objects are very important, right?
And I think this story does a really, really good job of, at the beginning of at the beginning of the movie, when Scrimgeour is there, right? Giving away the possessions. At this point, Harry really has never been given a reason to doubt Dumbledore. He's kind of like this all-powerful, perfect, untouchable, you know, okay, he's gone now, but
He wanted to have classes with me.
he's untainted, you know, he has this untainted image, this perfect image of Dumbledore. And he looks at Scripture and he says, yes, I am Dumbledore's man through and through.
Mhm.
And then right after that, with Elphias Dodge and
Nancy Burial.
yes, that one, and they're talking about you know, all these things that Rita Skeeter is writing about. And then just throughout the story, you know, little bits of pieces. Well, why didn't Dumbledore give me enough information? Why didn't this? And, you know, Harry's still unsure. And then when they get, I'm going to go into just a little bit.
okay.
When they get to Aberforth, that's where I think it's reaffirmed that Harry is still, his trust is still in Dumbledore. He is still Dumbledore's man. No matter what he's learned, what he's been told, he still has a job to do that's been given to this by a man he trusted.
And Harry has to make that choice, because since the plan of Dumbledore has not been laid out perfectly, all of a sudden Harry, Ron, and Hermione aren't really sure if Dumbledore 100% wants them following after Horcruxes, or if he wants them following after the Hallows. Should Harry become Master of Death? Is that the only way to defeat Voldemort and get all three of those objects? He knows he has the cloak. We assume that Dumbledore has the wand. Where is the stone? And in the movie, it doesn't say this, but Harry remembers a vision he had with Dumbledore in that pensieve, and he thinks that that ring had the stone in it, and the ring that Dumbledore broke during when he got his hand all blackened. He thinks that that was the stone, and Harry and Hermione and Ron are like, you don't have proof of that. No, I bet it was. I bet, you know, and he's got these doubts, but he's talking himself up. But I have two quick passages to read where it gives Harry that transition point of doubt, but then commitment. Out of sheer desperation, they had talked themselves into believing that going back to Godric's Hollow had the answers, and convinced themselves that they were supposed to go back. But it was all part of some sort of secret path that Dumbledore had laid out for them. But there was no map, there was no plan. Dumbledore had left them to grope in the darkness, to wrestle with unknown and undreamed of terrors, alone and unaided. Nothing was explained, nothing was given freely. They had no sword, and now Harry had no wand. I mean, he's just at the moment of despair, and then the sword presents itself, right? So just within moments of that. But we get to this point, and this is technically in the next movie, but I just want us to see that Harry is totally committed. Hermione says to Harry, you could never have broken into Dumbledore's grave. That actually is, I mean, I guess it's right there. Harry and Ron and Hermione actually have a conversation in Shell Cottage, which is where they are when Dobby dies. So that's at the very beginning of the next movie. But the idea of Dumbledore's corpse frightened Harry much less than the possibility he might have misunderstood the living Dumbledore's intentions. He felt that he was still groping in the dark. He had chosen his path, but kept looking back, wondering whether he had misread the signs, whether he should have taken the other way. But what Harry decided in that moment, when we go and we see at the very beginning of the next movie, what we're going to see is we're going to see that Harry goes to talk to the goblin first. So notice that he talks to the goblin first. And in that moment, Harry is actually sensing what they showed him sensing in the woods right before Hermione jinxed him to make his face look all funny. They kind of mix a few of those parts up, but this is like Harry having that moment of choosing, I'm going after the Horcruxes. I'm not going to pursue that wand. And he basically lets Voldemort get it, instead of trying to find his way to Hogwarts and get the wand before Voldemort, because he's got all these thoughts, he's seeing visions of Voldemort's mind. And Harry in that moment, right, it's really in Shell Cottage, but in this movie, they showed it in the woods. He's saying, I may not have all the answers. Dumbledore might be frustrating the heck out of me, but I'm going to trust the process because really I'm the hope of defeating this situation. And finally, we see poor Dobby. He has given his life.
So before we go into
Yeah,
Dobby,
go ahead.
I don't even know if this is good for me to ask,
Mhm.
so we'll just ask it. And we can defer to next week if we have to.
2 weeks from now, we're not meeting next
2
week.
weeks, 2 weeks. What does it mean that Dumbledore basically has all three?
He doesn't have all three at the same time.
He doesn't?
You have to possess them all at the same time.
He doesn't get the stone until he goes to the Gaunt's house and takes it, which was in this beginning of the sixth one, like the summer before, between 5 and 6.
After he gave away the cloak.
Yeah.
So
And he
doesn't
had
know.
Harry's cloak from, I don't know, 1991 to
But the
1996.
cloak was in the school. You could have just gotten it.
I mean,
Yes,
but Dumbledore was never really after that. I mean, after he defeated Grindelwald, like back when he defeated him, Dumbledore was like, he didn't really want power.
he realized he couldn't
that's
go
the
after
reason.
that anymore. He
Yeah.
realized he needed to be a professor and not Minister of Magic.
Yeah, because like they kept asking him to be minister, and he turned it down every time.
He recognized that he couldn't seek too much
Well, and I
power.
think that says a lot about Dumbledore.
He knew it was his
He knew-
weakness.
He knew his own mortality. I
It
think.
goes back to Harry being fit for it because leadership is thrust upon him. That's why Harry was his chosen person. And, Harry was the boy who lived, sure. But he really wasn't, the chosen one until the sixth or seventh movie when it's confirmed that by the prophecy and by all this, Dumbledore knew that Harry was the right person for this job, and that's why he went all in on Harry. He put all his chips in for Harry, I guess I would say, because he knew that unlike him, Dumbledore sought power, and he lost a lot because of his seeking it, and he knew that Harry was the exact opposite.
So I just have one quick quote to read, and it's just kind of beautiful to me. At the end of the movie, when Chris and I saw this in theaters, and it was the opening night, so I didn't know where the movie was going to end. I knew that it was going to end without the story finished because I knew there was going to be a part 2. But when it was getting to the end and they're on that beach, and I went, this is surely not how this thing's going to end. is it? And-
I will always remember that. You're like, you're not gonna do it. She's because I had no idea what's going on. And I'm like, this is the first time I've ever experienced a story. Like she's sitting over there, this is terrible.
You're just like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's a beautiful moment in the movie. But as we've already mentioned before, Dobby doesn't get enough screen time for us to really love him enough in that moment. But remember, these guys are
The
at
movie
war.
does a good job of
It's,
him.
I mean, in the
This
last,
last movie.
they do, yeah.
Like,
Master Weasley, so good to see
Yeah.
you.
I do think one thing that and it goes back to Harry and his growth towards the house elves and other creatures. Harry chose not to use magic to dig the grave, and the movie doesn't show that. And I feel like that was such a big part where he went out and he got a shovel, and all his friends thought he was crazy for doing. They're like, "What he's doing?" The only one who understood was Luna, who went out to be with him while he dug it, and he sat there and dug the grave by hand.
Yeah. And so as they're having the funeral now, Harry wrapped the elf more snugly in his jacket. And remember, they're in war and they're just fending for themselves. Sometimes they eat mushrooms, sometimes they're eating canned foods, whatever, right? Ron sat on the edge of the grave and stripped off his shoes and socks, which he placed upon the elf's bare feet. Dean produced a woolen hat, which Harry placed carefully upon Dobby's head, muffling the bat-like ears. So this creature who you can see at the grave, it says Dobby, a free elf, right? There's no more beautiful portrayal of being free for an elf as there is in having a full set of clothes, you know?
Well, the movie doesn't show all that.
No.
And it didn't show Luna either, but they mentioned her, but she's not at the gravesite in the movie.
No, she's just at the end and she goes, oh, why don't you close his eyes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dean was there too, in fact. Dean was down in that dungeon also, which was his friend from the dorms. And so that's why I mentioned him there, but they left him out of this.
Yeah, they don't show him going camping or running away. They don't see Dean
No.
Thomas and then Ted.
Just a snogger in the sixth one with Jenny.
Thomas's dad and wasn't a grip hook and another
Yeah,
goblin.
there were two goblins and Tonks's dad and Dean Thomas all out on the run.
Mhm. And then that's how we know that they captured grip hook, they captured Dean, and then we find out that the other two are not there. You know, so we assume that and find out later that they did end up getting murdered.
But I just think that's really special for Dobby, and he couldn't be with us today because he's a free elf now. Thanks for joining today. Yeah. And we have no Hedwig either. And no house portraits. I'll put them back up next week, though. We're back at Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Next movie.
Bombed
Not
out.
next week, the week after, the 14th.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's why I didn't bring the owl out today. I
Cinematic
was saying
times
last
though, like
week,
that battle
like,
was really.
like stripping the altar on Maundy Thursday. I didn't put the same stuff up. Yeah.
When we
Somebody
watched
had
the
a
movie,
house
the
painters.
Coley goes, ooh, I can put the cat plates back.
They go into Umbridge's office in ministry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where's Heather today?
It's Halloween and she has
Oh,
to
of
take the
course.
kids.
Of
Yeah.
course.
The kids have to have their Halloween.
What's wrong with?
Yeah, they're gonna be Peter Pan and Wendy.
How cute is that?
So why are we skipping next week?
We're out of time.
We're out of
Okay,
time.
good. I'm out of time too.
Okay, so we'll be back on the 14th for our final week together. It happened, the movie happens over about 36 hours, so they don't eat a lot, but I do have a few treats ready. Because at the very end of the last one, we do get to see a chocolate frog, so spoiler alert. Chocolate frogs.
You can just bring in everything, like from the whole movie.
Yeah, so thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everyone online.
See you guys. Enjoy your trick or treating, Christy.